somebody asked me a little while ago what all these stand for, and I told them, I said, I used to be able to list that off real quickly. I knew every one of them. I don't have to wear this uniform anymore, except for occasions like this, so I have forgotten what they are. I have to review that once in a while just to refresh my memory, because I'll look at that ribbon and I'll go, I should remember what that is, but I don't. And maybe that's part of being 72 years old. I don't know, but that's just the way it works. Can you say amen? Amen. Okay, I thought I was talking to the right crowd here, so good. Thank you very much. Some of you Vietnam vets, you know what that's like. That water's not going to cooperate. I'm going to take these gloves off. I'm taking the mask off because I can't talk through that thing. Okay. Allow me to pull up some notes here. I just want to share some things with you this afternoon, this evening. Try to keep these notes from flying away. First of all, I want to thank the Post Commander, Sam Pachuk, for having me this afternoon. I appreciate that invitation. Always an opportunity to share the experiences that I have had in the military, 34 years. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, you must really miss it. You've been in so long," and I'm going, "No, that was enough." Especially because since I never planned to make a career out of it. But God has a sense of humor. In case you hadn't figured that out yet, He does, and I had to learn that. I did want to introduce. It was already mentioned. My wife is Zora, is back there. Stand up, dear. Let them see you. There she is. And my granddaughter, Alyssa. Stand up. There you go. That's part of being my granddaughter. You got to do those things. I served as a Marine during Vietnam and in Vietnam because my stepfather was a Marine in World War II. And my brother and I grew up knowing that, and we were very proud of that fact. And because of that, both of us were attracted to and interested in the Marine Corps. So my brother, who's 5 years my senior, there it goes, he went in the Marine Corps in 1964. Well, I graduated from high school in 1966, and my intention was to go in the Marine Corps right then and there on the buddy system, the buddy program that they used to have. But when my brother went in, he went through boot camp down in a place they call Paris Island. And some of you have been there or went through there. Okay. Yay for ticks and chiggers, right? Yeah. The rest of us were smart. We're Hollywood Marines, amen? Come on now. There you go. It was good down there. But just wanted to mention that because of that, my brother went in. They picked him in the old Marquette program. Some of you remember the old Marquette program, Marine Cadet. You didn't have to be a college graduate. But if you had good ASVAB scores and that sort of thing, and had the aptitude, then they were willing to take you into the flight program, which they did with him. He graduated from flight school in July of '66, which is a month after I graduated from high school. Knowing that, and knowing that they made him a helicopter pilot, it was my idea and intention to not go in the Marine Corps right away and wait to see what was going to happen with him. As you know, Marine Corps second lieutenant helicopter pilots had a life expectancy in a combat zone of 2 minutes. During his 13 months in Vietnam, from February of '67 to March of '68, he spent about 6 months flying his CH-46, had over 220 combat missions, 11 air medals and a Distinguished Flying Cross. The rest of the time, he was at other places like Quang Tri and Khe Sanh. He was a forward air controller in Khe Sanh during that siege. In fact, when it was time for his tour to end in Vietnam, his commanding officer called him into his tent and he said, "Roots, you're out of here." Well, my brother said, how do I get out of here? The CO said, any way you can, because Quezon was in big trouble at that point. He went ahead and stayed in the Marine Corps Reserve for 28 years, had a total of 33 years service, retired as a colonel. When he left active duty in '69 is when I went in and went through San Diego. I didn't think I was going to necessarily get to Vietnam. That turned out to happen in 1972. So I got the tail end of the process, but I'm proud to have done that. Just want to run a few things past you, just so that we can stir up some memories and some thoughts. The 1950s in the United States, when you all and I were growing up, was kind of an age of innocence. It was actually a pretty good time to be a kid. Then along came 1963. And every one of you here who was alive at that time can remember where you were and what you were doing on November 22nd, 1963. The assassination of John F. Kennedy, our president. That was a stab in the heart that I'm not sure our country has ever recovered from. He was a popular president. It didn't matter that he was a Democrat. It didn't matter if he'd have been a Republican. He was just a popular president. In fact, today, based upon the things that he was trying to implement through his actions in the presidency, he would be a conservative. He was for small government, less taxes, and strong national defense. Kind of interesting, isn't it? But that's where he was. And I think many of us were very drawn to him. He had an energy and a vitality. So when that happened, a lot of us were just totally thrown off guard. In 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act, and race riots were taking place in major U.S. cities. 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King led a civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and the first 5,000 Marines landed on the beach in Vietnam. They sailed to Vietnam and they hit the beach. That's how it's. Were any of you involved in that? I haven't met one that it was, but that's how the first 5,000 Marines arrived in Vietnam. They hit the beach. Then there was a battle in November by Drang, the first major battle of the war. Any of you involved in that? A good friend of mine was the artillery officer in charge of that battle. 1966, nearly 500,000 U.S. troops are now in Vietnam. We went from 5,000 in 65 to almost 500,000 in 67. 66. In 67, in December of that year, remember what happened? The first Super Bowl. Played between the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. That's right. Ancient history, right? Seems like it. There was also the Battle of Quezon. It was going on in Vietnam. The folks back home got to see the numbers of killed that day posted on our TV screens. The war started to become unpopular. And so those of us who served were dealing with some issues here that we never expected. The unpopularity of the war, therefore, the target became those of us who were in the military. It was a difficult time. It was a difficult time for us. It was a difficult time for the country. 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, as was Bobby Kennedy. Then there was the Tet Offensive. 1969, there was something called Woodstock. Remember that? Also, in July of that year, first man on the moon. Fascinating historical things that were taking place, all of this during a time when we were at war. 1970, voting age was lowered to 18. That bummed me out because I was 20 in 1968. And I couldn't vote. By the time I was able to vote in 1972, I was in Vietnam, I was 24, and the voting age was 18. I've always felt like that just wasn't right, you know? There were demonstrations against the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C. Over 100,000 people showed up for that. 1970. 1971, Walt Disney World opened. 1972, digital watches were introduced. I remember that because I was in Japan at the time and they came out with the digital watches. There's also something called Watergate. Remember that? In 1973, January of 1973, the last U.S. combat troops left Vietnam. There's also another decision that was made by our Supreme Court. It's called Roe v. Wade. 1974, the average new house sold for $34,900. Any of you buy one then? My wife and I did a few years later. 1975, U.S. finally leaves Vietnam and the Vietnam War is declared to be officially over. It has been said by many, predominantly in the media, that we lost the war in Vietnam. In a manner of speaking, you could say that we indeed lost the war, but we did not lose it there. We lost it here. Statistics show that our military, despite being savaged by the press, won every battle during those 10 years. 65 to 75. Won every battle. How do you win every battle and lose a war? Well, when it's no longer supported at home, it's really hard to win a war, isn't it? I was called up in 2002 for the Iraq War. I was in the reserve, and my reserve position fleeted me up to be a deputy command chaplain for the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, the largest Marine unit in the world. And I remember, because I was writing an article each week for our hometown paper where I live in Ripon, and I remember in that article, one of the articles that I wrote, I said, do not forget what we did with the Vietnam vets. You forgot about them. You criticized them. And when we came back, there were those who spit on them, who said things about them that were totally false. I said, you're really supportive of what we're trying to do right now in Iraq? And I said, that's great, as it should be, but don't make the same mistake again. Don't do that. Now, I'm sure there were some people who weren't real happy with me writing that article, but doggone it, I didn't want to see people have to do that again. When the only people who are happy to see you come back from the war is your immediate family, that's a problem. Some of you know exactly what that feels like. You are the generation that followed the World War II fathers and mothers. You answered the call. Every single one of you wanted to perform at the same high level and standard as the greatest generation did in World War II. There is not one of us that wanted to go to Vietnam and not do our absolute best. The fact that our government often didn't allow us to do that is another issue altogether, but that does not mean you did not do your job. You did. We were criticized for being ignorant, uneducated, knuckle draggers. Well, Marines are identified that way anyway, but the rest of you know what I'm talking about. And yet, the statistics say that the Vietnam vets were the highest educated of any war the United States has ever had. So that's the sort of thing that we've had to put up with for many, many years. I think a lot of Americans have become embarrassed and ashamed because of the behavior that they had during that time. And so I think a lot of times you and I will hear people say to us, "Thank you for your service," and that's great. I like to hear that. That's nice. I don't need it because I did what I was asked to do. So did you. And there is pride in that. In preparing my talk today, I was reminded of what Thomas Paine wrote in 1776 to encourage our fledgling nation with the daunting task of taking up the impossible challenge of defeating the most powerful military in the world at that time, Great Britain. Thomas Paine's quote was appropriate for then. It was appropriate for you in your service to our country during Vietnam, and it is appropriate still for the challenges this next generation faces. And I want to tell you, I retired out of the military in 2008, and I had a chance to serve with our young people then, and they were a great bunch of folks. Don't feel like we've lost anything. We haven't. They are some great people, and we are well served by them. Let me share with you what Thomas Paine wrote, and you will recognize this, I'm sure. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods. And it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. You and I are aware of what's happening in our world today. Particularly in our country, our freedoms are threatened. This next generation has got to fight for them. You and I have done our job. That doesn't mean we still can't be involved. We should be. But our freedoms are at stake. We cannot and dare not allow them to be taken away from us. You, my fellow veterans and Vietnam War veterans, you did your job. You answered the call. And I am proud to be one of you. God bless you. And God bless America.